Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In this podcast, we will interview individuals who have been successful within athletics and beyond. We hope that these interviews will encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. We hope you enjoy our conversations and join us in understanding women's health today to ensure women's health tomorrow. Welcome to today's episode of the Champions of Active Women podcast. I'm Dee Dugonski, and with me today is Sandra Broadus, the Alternative Transportation Manager at the University of Kentucky. In this role, she coordinates bicycle, transit, and pedestrian programs and infrastructure on campus. In addition to her professional role at the university, Sandra is working to support active transportation in our community as chair of the Lexington Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and a board member for the Broke Spoke Community Bike Shop. She is actively promoting cycling among women as the founder of the Women Bike Lex Facebook group and the Spokeswoman Series monthly bike rides. Sandra is also working on her master's degree in public administration with a concentration in nonprofit management. Can't wait to dive into our conversation today. Thanks for joining me and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So could you begin by telling me about your role here at the university with as the Alternative Transportation Manager?
Yeah, sure. So the main thing I do is bicycle infrastructure programs and outreach. So that includes everything from bike racks and bike lane striping to the Wildcat Wheels Bicycle Library, which is our on-campus rental bike shop, and outreach activities like Pedalpalooza, which is a big K-Week event, and Bike Week. We also have a number of incentive programs that I'm in charge of to try and help people shift away from the idea that they have to park on campus. And so that's things like Commute Club, the Bike Voucher Program, Cash Out, things like that. I'm on our pedestrian advisory committee for campus. That's mostly about improving pedestrian infrastructure and safety. I also do a lot of transit planning, and I am the staff advisor for the Student Transportation Council, which is a group of students that decide how student transportation fee money is spent every semester. Okay. And I help anyone on campus with commute planning assistance. So if they're interested in trying out riding the bus or riding a bike or something like that, and they've never really done that before, then I help them figure out the best routes to get them from point A to point B.
Great. That's a good summary of what you do here on campus. And yeah. I can say that after we met the first time, I certainly have been thinking a lot more about giving up my bike, or giving up, not my bike, my car, and kind of thinking about how to commute actively to campus. So,
that's awesome.
So you're doing a great job in your role. It's been on my mind since we last talked.
That's good to hear.
Can you tell me about how you found this career path?
Yeah, so I actually kind of just stumbled into it. I have a background in natural resources and environmental science, but I got a seasonal job when I was living in Montana for a little while as a bicycling ambassador, which basically was just a summer gig to promote bicycling safety and lead bike rides and things for the city of Missoula. And I just totally fell in love with it. I didn't realize that was a career option. And so I tried to figure out how to make it a full-time thing and not a seasonal thing. Mm-hmm. And so I started talking to my boss, who was the city bike ped coordinator for Missoula, and he connected me to a whole bunch of people. And so I ended up being the bike ped coordinator at the University of Montana for a couple of years before I transitioned back to UK, which is my alma mater.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you here and seeing all the good things that are happening on campus with active transportation. So what's your favorite part about that job?
It's different every day, and I don't feel stuck in the office, which is awesome. I, because I have things going on all over campus and I'm helping people all over campus, I really get to be everywhere, and really learn a lot about different people and what they do. Transportation, I feel like, is one of the few departments on campus that really touches every single person, regardless mm-hmm. of what they do on campus. And so just being able to learn more about the university and be a part of it in some way is really cool.
Awesome. And so then on the flip side, what do you feel is most challenging about your position?
The most challenging thing is definitely, I would say, like department perception. I think transportation is kind of seen as the bad guy on campus by a lot of
Parking
people.
tickets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we're the parking guys, and so that's not really how it works. We are just trying to make sure it's not the Wild West out there. And our parking people work really hard. But, on the flip side, we take that parking money and put it into things like free bus service for everyone and making sure we have nice bicycle facilities and things like that. And so I think people sometimes only see transportation as the parking people, but we really do a lot more than just that.
Mm-hmm. And so as you're in your role, as you're working with people, in particular in the commute planning, as you're thinking about getting them to shift from car primarily or exclusively to other forms of transportation, what are some of the things that you've found helpful with people, and maybe one of the challenges that people have too?
Yeah, definitely. One of the hardest things is geography. It really depends on where people live as to whether or not they have good routes they can take if they want to bike, or if they live, within walking distance of a transit stop and things like that. And so for some people, it's a lot easier than others. Like, sometimes people will ask me for commute planning assistance, and I'm like, oh, well, this is so easy. I ride that route all the time. And sometimes I'm like, oh, gosh, like, how am I going to help this person? Because this is really challenging. And so for those people, a lot of times I recommend like a park and ride option.
Okay.
And so finding Lextran has multiple park and ride places where they can park for free and then get on the bus, or they can. We have actually, I know quite a few faculty members that park out by the Legacy Trail and then ride their bike
cool.
from there, because they live like out in the Georgetown area or something like that.
That's a fun way to kind of combine to do better transportation.
Yeah, exactly. And then you still save so much money just not buying a parking permit and things like that.
Cool. So can you talk a little bit about shifting gears to how you grew up and thinking about physical activity and sport experiences in your early life?
Yeah, gosh, I was a super active kid. I did basketball and swimming both for 8 years. Okay. And then I did like a handful of other things for a year or two, like gymnastics and volleyball and things like that. And then I actually pretty much quit all those things when I got to high school and just did band. I did like I did marching band and pep band and jazz band and all those things. And that was just so time consuming. I didn't have time for sport, but I really missed it. And so when I got to college, I actually did a year of women's rugby.
Okay.
And since then, I haven't been involved in like organized sport, but I'm active in other types of more individualized sports.
Yeah, I had to laugh when I asked you for an active picture for the cover. You sent me 6 pictures pretty quickly, and you couldn't pick one, and they were of 3 different activities. So Could you talk about some of those activities you enjoy?
Yeah, definitely. So bicycling's the obvious one that people know me for, I think, but I'm really involved in whitewater kayaking. That's one of my favorite things to do, and that's pretty much where all my free time goes. And but I also really enjoy hiking, and I just bought my first pair of rock climbing shoes last month, so I'm trying to get into rock climbing now.
All right, there you go. So how these different activities, or have you had friends that got you into them, or did you just try them out on your own? How did you get into these different activities?
Yeah, with cycling, it was I remember my parents had like the seat that goes on the back of their bicycles. And so I actually remember being a tiny kid and my parents taking me for rides in the neighborhood. But then we moved out to a rural area and our road was like 60 miles an hour. So I pretty much didn't bike very much as a kid until I got to college. And so I rediscovered it as just a mode of transportation when I got to college, and then started branching out into more recreational riding. Whitewater kayaking was definitely one I knew someone who was in that, and they pulled me into it. So that was really helpful because that's like a very intimidating thing to
right. That's why I asked.
I'm
thinking, how do you get into that? It's not one of the standard answers about how people are active.
Yeah, definitely. It's a small community, but it's a very passionate one. And then. Yeah, I mean, hiking is super accessible, and rock climbing, I have a lot of friends that were involved with that in college, and I felt like I wanted to get into it, but I wasn't. I was kind of like, I just never did for some reason. I always had excuses, and so I'm finally like giving myself the kick in the pants to get into it.
Yeah. And all of those activities are outdoors. Is that by design?
Yeah, definitely. I really love being outside and try to find as many excuses as I can to be outside because there is a lot of paperwork and back end things that I have to do with my job, but anytime I can not be in the office, I feel like it's a good day.
So you prefer to get your activity outdoors as
for
well.
Sure.
Great. So in both your personal and your professional roles, you're really well connected in the biking community here in Lexington. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about why that's so important to you, why promoting biking in the community is so important to you.
Yeah, I think that biking is, to oversimplify it, biking, I think, is the solution to all of society's problems.
All right, I like it. Bold statements here this morning.
But really, if more people biked, we wouldn't have traffic congestion. We wouldn't have all this land wasted on parking resources. We could have more dense communities where people felt like they could walk or bike to things. People would be healthier, both mentally and physically. And people would be saving money, and we would have fewer greenhouse gases and cleaner air. I just feel like, if more people biked, the world would be a better place.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer. That's as simply put as it can be, right? And for a lot of good reasons. Mm-hmm. So, and some of your efforts have been focused directly at women, and obviously we're interested in promoting physical activity for women. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of those efforts that you are part of in the community and why you think they're important specifically to women.
Yeah, so I, for 2019, I decided to lead a monthly women's bike ride just to kind of see how that would go. Mm-hmm. And so I've been calling that the Spokeswoman Series, and that's been really fun. And I've had different people show up for every ride so far, so that's really cool, kind of expanding the bubble a little bit. The reason I think focusing on women's cycling is important to me is because there's a lot of studies out there that say that cycling is a male-dominated activity in the U.S., both for transportation and for recreation. It's like a 60-30 split almost. So it's, that doesn't add to 100, but you get my idea here. Yeah. So that's a big reason I want to focus on it for women because in the U.S., cycling, I think, is perceived as a really dangerous activity by a lot of people. And that's not true in other countries. And, it's more of a 50-50 split gender divide in other countries where cycling is popular. And so I'm just trying to build the community of women who feel safe by cycling. And the best way to feel safe or to dip your toes in is to do it in a group. And then you can learn all these new routes and make friends. And then it's easier to do it on your own if you want to.
Yeah. I rode for transportation last night for one of the first times in a long time. And I wasn't not in a group. It was a very short ride. But I forgot how freeing a bike can be.
Yes.
I mean, I've been on my bike, but I have had my young son on the back and it's not freeing when he's riding on the back. But last night it was one of the first times and it was a really good feeling. And I wonder if you hear reports like that from some of the women who come to your ride.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my favorite rides this year, I think it was in May or maybe April, but had a woman I had never seen before come to my ride, and she had not been on a bike since she was like, I don't know, like an elementary school age a person. And she was just so excited because she we only rode maybe like 6 miles or so, and less than an hour. And she was like, I didn't even know I could ride 6 miles. Yeah. She was like, I thought this was going to be so hard, and it wasn't. And it just feels like I feel like a kid again. And so I just that's really awesome for me to hear, because I feel like it does feel like you're a kid again. Mm-hmm. And if more people realized how fun it was, hopefully they'd want to do it more.
Yeah, it really was fun. And I was riding through our neighborhood and I saw a neighbor who I know, and we said hello. I mean, there's so many good things that I think can happen when we're on our bikes. So I think it's a really empowering thing. And I love that you're doing some of those rides for women in particular.
Yeah.
So in what ways does leading an active lifestyle impact other areas of your life?
I feel like being active definitely defines like every part of my life. I try to ride for transportation at least 90% of the time, 100% of the time when I'm commuting to work, because I don't want to buy a parking permit, but even in other aspects of transportation. And so, for me, I rarely leave the boundaries of New Circle Road unless I'm like meeting a friend or something that they wanted to go somewhere. And so just like challenging myself to find businesses that meet my needs within, a few miles of my house, rather than just going to the big box store that I know has those things that I could drive to easily. I'm looking for the stairs instead of the elevator when I go into a building and things like that. And so, I had a few years of my life where I was very sedentary, and that was definitely a time that I was less happy than I am now, or that I was previously. And so I definitely feel like those are connected.
Yeah, it's a very intentional, once you've decided to go that route, it's a very intentional way to live, and you make different decisions across your whole life, it sounds like. What do you find most challenging about that here in Lexington? Like, what do you wish was different, or what would make that easier for you?
I guess driver behavior. A lot of times, we have a law in Kentucky that drivers are supposed to give cyclists 3 feet of space when they pass them on the road. And that's actually a fairly new law. And so I don't feel like a lot of drivers are aware of that, or they just aren't in tune to what it feels like to be passed closely on a bicycle by a large motor vehicle. And so, I just feel like if more people were aware of what it feels like to be cycling on the road, that they would make it easier.
For cyclists.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you want to leave our listeners with about active transportation, or being active in general?
It's easier than you think. I find that, as far as active transportation, there's a bajillion resources out there to help people make that first step or dip their toe in the water however they can. And, that's basically my whole job. So please reach out, and I can connect you to those resources. And then as far as being active in general, I feel like, it's really hard to motivate yourself to get off the couch. And so I try and schedule my day so that I don't get on the couch until I'm done with whatever I'm doing for the day, so that, I either, after work, I'll go to yoga or go to the gym or go on a ride or something like that, go to a trail, so that by the time I get home, I can just flop, and then I don't feel like a total slug the rest of the day.
I think that's good advice. I know if I get home for the day, it's over, right?
Yeah.
Like the being active part, unless we go for a walk with our family. But so, any advice in particular for women about getting out there and riding, or girls, for that matter, girls or women?
Just look for other girls and women who are doing these things, because we're out here and we want to do it with you. I feel like it's really empowering to be with a group of women who are interested in the same things you are, and those groups are out there, and you just have to take that step. It's scary to go to a place where you don't know anyone, or but it's not scary. It's great.
Great. Well, anything else you'd like to add today?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate your time and appreciate everything you're doing for the community.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and was produced by the Faculty Media Depot at the University of Kentucky. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to all of our episodes wherever you find your podcasts. For up-to-date information about the Active Women's Health Initiative, you can find us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for supporting us as we work to promote health and physical activity among girls and women across the lifespan.